Welcome everyone back to the channel. I am, of course, retired rap artist Mike Jones. I don't look
Mike
like I did in the
Jones.
music videos. Of course, that's what aging will do to you. All the stress, the wear and tear of parenthood really has just turned me into something else. So I am here with the
Sad.
Dizzle.
That's true. You are.
Yeah. How you doing today?
Hey, how's it going there, Mike? Let me just say here, right at the beginning, it is way cooler doing a show with a Christian and not an atheist. With the atheist, you log on beforehand, and then he's just nonstop whining about the meaninglessness of life and hopelessness and despair and so on, and how pointless everything is. And why are we even going to have this live stream when it's so irrelevant in the grand scheme of things? It's massively depressing working with an atheist. I do it anyway to be nice, but it is cool. It is it is refreshing to be here with a Christian.
You got me a little depressed just talking about all that. Jeez, calm down over there.
Yeah. Even thinking about it's making me like, gosh, man, what's the point? It's just a bunch of atheists going to be hanging around whining later on.
Well, tomorrow night, AP and I might be on Twitter, and we might do a space on the whole Twitter hashtag going around, going Christ is King. Talk a little bit about Israel and how Christians should respond to that. Kat wanted to set it up. You know, Kat from Twitter.
No,
you know what I'm talking about.
No.
Kat, Canada.
Oh yeah. That's cool. No, that's good. Yeah, definitely. No, that'll be a good lineup. So I would suggest, as soon as we're done with this live stream, do nothing but read Schopenhauer the entire time up until you're having discussion with AP.
I will be extremely, extremely depressed if I do that. So, but that's what we're doing here today. Today we're going to be responding to Shaykh Uthman. Someone posted a video of him on TikTok, which I quickly responded to, and I said, "Look, Sheikh, if you want to have a debate on this topic, I would be happy to have it." And then I reached out to him privately through Modern Day Debate, and we never heard anything back. So I decided, because of that, and because Easter is right around the corner, we are in the Holy Week itself, might be fun to respond to his video where he is going up, where he is talking to people on the streets, I guess, to come up to his booth or something, and are woefully unprepared to really defend the position. And of course, Uthman takes advantage of that and tries to argue that the Islamic view is, of course, true, which is one of the most ridiculous things you could see in scholarship. It's the idea that Jesus wasn't even crucified, which is not even entertained by professional scholars today. But Shaykh Uthman is defending the Sunni tradition, understanding where the Quran teaches that Jesus was never crucified.
And that's what Islam does. It is interesting that you can have. So we've got all the sources: Christian, Jewish, Roman, reporting Jesus' death by crucifixion. It's an issue where scholars from every background are on the same page: conservative Christian, liberal Christian, atheist scholars, agnostic scholars, Jewish scholars. Everyone, even some Muslim scholars, grant Jesus' death by crucifixion because of the historical evidence, but because of one verse in the Quran, one Quran verse, which is hopelessly unclear, and even Muslims have never been able to agree on. There's always been a minority position that this isn't actually denying the crucifixion of Jesus. It's a response to Jews who were boasting about it, and it was basically a response to Jews saying, "Hey, you guys didn't do what you thought you did because Allah raised him up, and therefore he's not dead." So you've always had that as a position, but even among the Muslims who interpret this, the dominant position has always been some version of substitution theory, where Allah miraculously disguises someone else and makes him look like Jesus. But you can go to 10 different Muslim commentaries and get 10 completely different explanations of what happened there. And they can be broken down into multiple categories. Like some are the punishment theme. In other words, Allah was punishing someone else by disguising him and making him take Jesus' punishment. So this is where you get the Judas version, but there are other versions. There's one of the soldiers who was coming to get Jesus. Allah punished him by making him look like Jesus. And then so you have the punishment theme, but then you have the volunteer theme, where some of them are Jesus is he's looking around for a volunteer. Hey, I guarantee paradise to anyone who takes my place. And one of his followers, oh, I'll do that. I want to go to paradise and get my virgins and so on. So someone volunteers. So you have variations of the volunteer, but they won't even agree on who volunteered. And it becomes very clear that they're just making stuff up. Because even if you assumed that one of those versions was the correct one, every other Muslim scholar made up some alternate version of that story. And it's just amazing that you can reject all scholarship, reject all of history, reject one of the best established facts of the ancient world because of one verse in the Quran that you can't understand, and that Muslims have been lying about ever since. It's just it's insane stuff.
Yeah, it is a really weird position. And I think when you had your conversation with Khalil Andani, I think he made a good case that the Quran doesn't necessarily teach that Jesus wasn't crucified. However, in the Sunni tradition, people like Shaykh Uthman still adamantly defend this idea that Jesus wasn't crucified because of what early commentators have said about this. And it's an absolutely ridiculous position. I mean, Gerd Ludemann says it's an indisputable fact that Jesus died by crucifixion. Then you get, like John Dominic Crossan say that it is just an historical fact that Jesus died. Like, even if no Christian wrote anything down. Yeah, everyone. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I had a debate about him 2 months ago with an Ahmadi Muslim, which is a little bit better. It's one step above the typical Sunni tradition, because they say Jesus was crucified but survived. But then you still have Sunnis, specifically the Salafis, running around going, nah, he wasn't even crucified, which is just, I don't know, that is just an absurd position. And they're still defending this. And I see people sending me this clip right around Easter. So I was like, all right, let's go into this once again to show how ridiculous the Muslim apologetic really is. So again, my debate offer is still open to Shaykh Uthman if he wants to debate this.
Mine too.
Feel free.
Happy to join him.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you for becoming a channel member.
Matter of fact, before anyone in the any of his followers show up in the chat at some point and says, why aren't you having this discussion with Shaykh Uthman? Guys, we pointed out he already agreed to debate Shaykh Uthman on it. I hereby agree on my channel to debate Shaykh Uthman on whether Jesus died by crucifixion this Friday. It's Good Friday, ladies and gentlemen. Happy to have it on my channel. So do not complain that we're having this discussion without someone who refuses to take part in the discussion, ladies and gentlemen, because I get that all the time. Why aren't you having this discussion about Muhammad with a Muslim? Okay, any Muslim wants to have this discussion about Muhammad with anyone wants to join us is welcome to join us. But yes, so we've said it, ladies and gentlemen, we are willing to have this debate. Yeah. Both of us, either one. He could pick one and pick which channel he wants to be on. It's not going to happen. 0% chance probability.
Yeah, I'd be happy to have Shaykh Uthman on my channel to discuss this. And I think back in November, through Modern Day Debate again, I tried to ask him if he would debate me on his claim that Christmas is pagan. He said he was too busy traveling, the last I heard, and then we never heard anything back again on that. So I debate Shaykh Uthman. Shaykh Uthman. He's been arguing for years that Christmas is a pagan holiday using
you challenged him to debate?
Oh yeah. I tried again.
He's not Modern Day Debate. He's not going to do a formal debate. He will only have a discussion when he's kind of surrounded in the background by his guys who are like nodding in agreement and cheering for everything he says. That's the only environment that he's going to. I'm just saying that's the only debate that's the only environment he's going to debate in. He's not going to debate like a formal debate.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. But I'll have just as a discussion with him. So, but hey, if he doesn't want a formal debate, we'll discuss it. But yeah, who is Mike Jones? Well, that would be me, sir. Good question. Who? More important question is, why is Mike Jones? That's what we really need to be asking. Who has the best bookshelves between the two of you? Well, me.
No.
Well, let's see yours. Hold on. Let me see if I can do a solo layout. There you go. Look at that.
Zoom out.
Look at that.
Look at that.
There you go. Zoom out.
You guys don't see how wide this is. See on the sides there, you've got the paintings. That's the painting started, and then the shelves go on all the way, wall to wall. 12 foot wide, 12 feet wide, ladies and gentlemen. That's how I roll.
Hold on, let me see if I can zoom out anymore. So I just had these built, and so
you had these built. I had mine
sure
built too by me and my son.
Yeah, I would have done horrible in that, and I didn't have the time, so I was like, you know what, I know a guy. I'll just see how much he'll charge, and it wasn't that bad, so we decided to go with
it. It is time consuming because you got to get the wood, then you have to sand it, and yeah, you have to. I had to, you know, I cut slots on mine for paintings and stuff, and then of course you have to paint them and do multiple layers of paint because you can have books rubbing around on them, and then you have to make them actually be shelves and not just stacks of wood. So yeah.
And this house was built really wonky. So when he was here building them, he's like, this is all like unlevel. Like if I actually I had tilted my camera slightly because the shelves look unlevel because the floor is not level. The wall going back is not level. Like he had to he said this was more work than he anticipated because of how weird my walls are. So
yeah, you do not need to defend your shelves here, sir. Your shelves are not nearly as good as mine. That is just a fact. An objective fact, but you do have good high quality shelves. What we can agree on is that compared to us, Mike Winger's shelves are pure garbage and an insult to the Christian community.
Absolutely. That is probably the best point you've probably made tonight, and will be the best point you've made all night for sure. Who is your favorite, the IP or the Dizzle? How about the Ip Dizzle? How about that? Can we do that one?
Is he asking you? Is he asking you who your favorite is? Yourself or me?
Yeah, me. I have to put up with me, so I hope I like me. Oh, let's see what this is.
Everyone loves the Dizzle.
If it would load. Why is that one not loading? Oh, there it goes. David mocks people for being nerds, but I have screenshots of David wearing a Star Trek shirt on This Week in Jihad. Proof is on my Twitter, says Murder Mouse. Is that Jesus? Is that the mouse from Gaza?
Yeah, that's Farfour, the Martyr Mouse. That's a good name for Farfour, though. Yeah, I did wear a Star Trek. Guys, it's like Jesus set an example of he entered creation, lowered himself, and so on. So sometimes super cool dudes have to interact with nerdy guys, you know.
Yeah, that's why he puts up with me. Thank you for your super chat, your $1. Appreciate that. All right, I'm gonna get the video up here. Let's get into this because I have started it a little bit after because he's talking with this guy on the streets and he basically just is like, well, you know, they're just talking about how the Catholic Bible has more books than the Protestant Bible and why this guy's a King James onlyist. So I want to get to the more relevant parts because this is Shaykh Uthman's typical case against the biblical text.
Gosh, how many mics has he got on him?
Yeah, I noticed that. Like, man, what? And they're all bad. Like his audio is overblown too. So like he's got all these mics and the audio is still terrible. So whoever is doing his AV needs to step it up.
Yeah, maybe they don't. Yeah, guys, it's very simple. We're going to give you some help. If you have a mic and you plug it right into a camera, you might need to do some adjustments. You might need to do some adjustments with the camera and so on. And so how you do that is you test it in advance. You go outside and you speak at a range of volumes and so on and record yourself. And you say things like, okay, this is on this setting. I'm recording now. This is how it sounds. Okay, now I lowered the volume by 2 notches and this is how it sounds. And then you get that sweet spot and then you don't embarrass yourself.
Yeah, this audio is horrible. Although, I mean, there's a lot of outside noises, but you'd think you get something with all those mics.
Trivial coincidence in the chat said Uthman wearing mics like they're military medals.
That you admit has errors, right? And you have a book. And you have a book with no errors.
I believe
right?
There's a lot of errors.
Show me.
I believe a lot.
I'm here. Man. You have it in your hand. I'm standing.
I just gave you a main one.
That's not an error.
I gave you a main one.
Once again,
historically true.
Once again, you're faking history.
It's not historically
Jesus
true.
Being crucified. Show me the historic evidence.
The Jews.
We had a Jew here earlier. I don't know if he's still here.
So hold on. Did he admit to the Jews crucifying Yeshua?
He admitted that somebody was killed, but he does not say this was Jesus. Okay. Now that's the Jews that you're talking about. He was here, and he says, hold on. According to the Jews that you're quoting, he said that he was not a Messiah, and he was born out of wedlock. Mary had an affair with a man, and it was not a son of God. That's a Jewish belief. So if you want to go there, we can go there with the Jews. So, but it's going to hurt your view, right? No, we don't believe that.
But you don't, obviously, but you believe in the Immaculate Conception of Yeshua.
We believe you.
So let's stop it right there. So Shaykh Uthman is contesting the idea that Jesus was crucified, and he's claiming there's no historical evidence that has been shown to demonstrate that, which in his the only thing he cites is there was some Jew here earlier who said that someone was crucified, but not Jesus.
That's his evidence. Yeah.
Quite honestly, if you don't think Jesus was crucified, you're not interested in historical evidence, because all the historical evidence attests to Jesus being crucified. There's no way around this. All of our earliest Christian sources, Paul, for example, Paul citing early creeds like the one we find in 1 Corinthians 15, the Gospels all report it. All of the early Christian writings that speak about what happened to Jesus report he died by crucifixion, as well as secular sources like Tacitus and Suetonius, or not Suetonius, excuse me, I meant Josephus, the uninterpolated version, Lucian, for example, the Talmud. All these sources attest to it. How can you, if you don't think there's historical evidence for the resurrection, you're not interested in historical evidence. I don't know what to tell you at this point.
Yeah, and the guys who use this method, which is what Shaykh Uthman has to use. Give me the proof, give me the proof. And of course, he's talking to a guy who doesn't know exactly what to point to here. But assuming that he was talking to someone who could, just point out, hey, we have a bunch of first century documents that talk about Jesus' death by crucifixion, or historians consider this an indisputable fact. If someone were there pointing out any of this, he would just suddenly play skeptic. Well, that's not proof. Well, what about this? Well, maybe this. Well, how do you know it wasn't this? Or how do you know it wasn't that? And these guys don't realize, they just don't realize it is very, very easy to play skeptic. And if you want to go that route, prove to me, you could say something like, Shaykh Uthman, prove to me that Muhammad even existed. Prove to me that Muhammad even existed. Prove to me that he was a person. I'll use your method. Prove to me. Show me the early evidence. Guess what? There is none. Their earliest source on the life of Muhammad comes from more than a century after Muhammad's death. You have some inscriptions and so on, like in the Dome of the Rock. There are people who believe that any reference to Muhammad was actually a title, and maybe even a title for Jesus. So you can actually explain those away. You can be skeptical and conclude that Muhammad never even existed. Matter of fact, there was a Muslim convert, Muhammad Sven Kalish. He's a German scholar, and there was a wave of interest in him because he came out and said he didn't think Muhammad ever existed. When he described what happened, he said, well, for years I had been applying these critical methods to the Old Testament and the New Testament. And I thought to myself, well, if this is the method that is supposed to get us to the truth, why don't I apply the exact same method to my study of Muhammad? And he walked away saying, I don't think Muhammad ever even existed. Why? He learned how to be very, not just critical, but very skeptical of sources and so on, because he'd been trained like that as a Muslim in order to attack Christian evidences. And then what happened when he tried to be consistent for 1 second, he had to abandon his belief, not just that Muhammad is a prophet, that Muhammad ever even existed. So this is why what you'll have is the Muslim Dawah guys, when you're talking about Christian claims, they dial their skepticism level up to 10. Prove this to me, prove that to me, prove this to me, prove that to me. How do I know it wasn't corrupted? And then when they're making their own claims, their skepticism level goes down to 1. And so you kind of just have to call them on it and demand consistency.
Yeah, and even if you go to like scholars that are skeptical of a lot of Christian teachings, ideas in the New Testament, like Paula Fredrickson, they're going to say the single most solid fact about Jesus' life is his death. He was executed by the Roman prefect Pilate. Raymond Brown says most scholars accept the uniform testimony of the Gospels that Jesus died during the Judea prefecture of Pontius Pilate. You also have, for example, John Dominic Crossan, as I mentioned earlier, who says Jesus' death by crucifixion under Pontius Pilate is as sure as anything historical could ever be. Ger Ludemann says it's an indisputable fact. Bart Ehrman, in his book on Did Jesus Exist, says that Jesus died by crucifixion is almost universally attested in our sources early and late. We have traditions of Jesus's bloody execution in independent gospel sources throughout our various epistles and other writings, and certainly in Paul, everywhere in Paul, who once again is our earliest Christian writer. And of course, if you just look at the evidence, like it's mentioned in Tacitus, it's mentioned in the letter of Mara ben Serapion, it's mentioned in the Talmud, it's mentioned in Josephus and Antiquities, it's mentioned in Lucian, it's mentioned in Celsus. So you have it in all of our earliest Christian writings. We have Paul talking about it. We have Paul citing an early creed talking about it. We have it throughout the Gospels where Jesus is said to die. Then we have Jesus reporting it himself over and over and over again. So the idea we don't have historical evidence, if this isn't historical evidence, I don't know what would qualify as historical evidence. What do you want, a videotape from the first century at this point? Like,
no, think about this.
Evidence.
So you have all these sources. If you were to ask Shaykh Uthman about his reason for believing something about Muhammad, so why do you believe this about Muhammad? The answer you're going to get is because it's in Sahih al-Bukhari or something like that. Sahih al-Bukhari was written 2 centuries after the time of Muhammad. So he takes it as good as gold, a source, 2 centuries after the time of Muhammad. That will be his go-to source. That and Sahih Muslim, both of them, 2 centuries after the time of Muhammad. And they will take these as indisputable facts about the life of Muhammad. In the meantime, we have piles of first century sources talking about the death of Jesus, and they'll just play skeptic with them. And it's just a massively flawed methodology, but you need a massively flawed methodology if you want to get to massively flawed conclusions.
Yeah, it's a very weird tactic because if they were to use that same skepticism they have on their own sources, they have to throw it all out the window. And a lot of the scholars they cite, like Paula Fredrickson or Bart Ehrman, are not going to be sympathetic to their views, as Bart Ehrman's interview with Muhammad Ajab showed that Bart Ehrman admitting he's closer to Christianity because he thinks Jesus was crucified and all sorts of things like that. If they were to take that same skepticism and apply it to their own documents, guys, they'd have to throw them all out because this would be like having the Gospels written in around the year 200 AD when you compare it to the Hadith collections, like around the time of Origen, or perhaps. Like that's how far off their collections and their biography on Muhammad are. It doesn't even compare. Meanwhile, we have Gospels being written, I argued in a recent video, before 70 AD. So Matthew, Mark, and Luke were written before then, as well as all of Paul's letters. We have far better attestation for Jesus. And yet Muslims deny just a basic fact that Christians celebrate all over the world and have celebrated for 2,000 years. I don't know what to do at this point. Like, if you're not interested in that as historical evidence, nothing will convince you because you have a dogma at this point and you won't get around that dogma.
And yeah, so guys, if you wanted a comparison, just think if our beliefs about Jesus, when we're actually appealing to historical information about Jesus, imagine if our sources were we're all from the 3rd century.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if all of the historical sources we had to go on were from the 3rd century. I don't think we'd stand up to criticism very well. No. But that's the boat that Islam is in. Their earliest historical source on the life of Muhammad is Ibn Ishaq. They don't go to that. They believe that it's a flawed source because it didn't use the later hadith methodology. So the sources that they actually go to, Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, their top sources are from 2 centuries after the time of Muhammad. So if you went 2 centuries after the time of Jesus, you'd be into the 3rd century. Imagine if our historical information about Jesus we had to get from the 3rd century. That's the boat that they're in with Muhammad. And keep in mind, it's different. I mean, Jesus is going around. I mean, most of the time he's like, preaching along the side of the Sea of Galilee or something. You wouldn't expect a ton of historical sources talking about him. Even his crucifixion, the Romans crucified tons of people. So it's amazing that we have so many sources. according to Islam, Muhammad's going around conquering the Arabian Peninsula and challenging the Romans and challenging the Persians, and everyone's terrified of him. You go to the historical sources of the time, no one's ever heard of the guy. No one mentions him. You can't even find Mecca on the maps back then. It definitely wasn't a trade route as it is in the Muslim sources. So the point is, you have tons and tons and tons of reasons to be skeptical about the information in those later Muslim sources. You have zero reasons to be skeptical about Jesus' death by crucifixion, and yet Muslims will be skeptical of that because of a verse in the Quran from the 7th century that they can't figure out what it means. So think about this. It's, you can't trust all those 1st century sources that you Christians have about the death of Jesus. You can't trust scholars. All you can trust is this one verse that Muslims can't figure out in the 7th century by a guy who walked out of a cave and was a caravan robber.
Right. And again, scholars date the Christian sources to the 1st century based on internal evidence and the like. All right. Opinions on Trump defending the KJV Bible. Super chat from Aaron. I have no clue what that's about. What did something happen in politics?
I have no idea. I like the KJV Bible. It's the best Bible.
It's got all the best words. I know the best words.
I've always said 1611, only way to heaven. If the king ain't on it, the king ain't in it. That's what I say. Vote for me.
Yeah, I've heard nothing about that. I try to get on my politics from scrolling Twitter and just looking at memes, just because I refuse to read up on the news. Because if I start, I won't stop, and then I won't get any work done. So
I would just have to say, I would just have to say whether Trump defended the KJV Bible or didn't defend the KJV Bible, that would have zero impact on my view of anything having to do with the Bible.
I really don't care half the time what Trump says. David, you really need to be more sensitive. Yesterday you were bullying a black one. Now you replace your diverse partner with a white man. What?
This is apostate Aladdin. He's mimicking apostate Aladdin, the guy who went after the apostate prophet and was saying that we're not sensitive enough. So he's a parody of that.
Ah, I see.
So yesterday we're talking about Candace Owens at AP can't stand her because she's a strong black woman, whereas I have some objections to her defending Andrew Tate and things like that. But so that's what he's talking about.
Yeah. John Dominic Crossan has not received sufficient dawah. No, he has not. I'll see Muslims cite him along with like Bart Ehrman or Paula Fredrickson, and I'm like, what are you guys doing? Like, these guys would destroy your worldview if you actually asked them about Islam. Like, these guys are not your friends, Muslims. Like they are. You try to present some of your ideas to them, like the Old Testament prophesies Muhammad, or that Muhammad's in the New Testament. They're gonna laugh. Like, they're not even taken serious in scholarship.
Yeah. But this is the method that Muslims have been using forever, right? It's because even the claim that Muhammad is in the Bible, they'll go to the Bible and verse 1 contradicts Islam. Verse 2 contradicts Islam. Verse 3 contradicts Islam. Verse 4 contradicts Islam. Oh, we get to verse 14. Oh, that's something we could twist into something that lines up with Islam. Verse 15, no, that contradicts Islam. Verse 16, that contradicts Islam. 17, no, that contradicts Islam. All right, we'll just go with 14 then. You see, 14, that's the proof that Islam is true. They somehow can look at 1,000 verses in a row, all of which contradict Islam. And there's one which, when completely ripped out of the context of everything that contradicts Islam, can be twisted into something that sounds like it agrees with something in Islam. They'll go to that, ignore everything else, say, see, this is the clear proof. This is the clear proof that Muhammad's a true prophet. They do that everywhere, right? So they do that with the Bible. They even do that with the Quran, right? So you'll go, up, here it is. Dul Qarnayn traveled so far west, he found the place where the sun sets. It sets in a muddy pool. Okay, we'll ignore that one. Oh, here's something that says the universe was smoke. Smoke. Well, that's kind of like gas, even as long as you ignore what smoke actually is, that it contains carbon particles, which, according to the Big Bang Theory, was not around back then. But we'll say that this is talking about the Big Bang, and that's how they do it. They'll go to any source, and they'll go to any book, and they'll just go page after page after page after page after page until they find something that can be used for Islam. They'll use it even if everything else in there completely contradicts it. That's how they use the Bible. That's how they use the Quran. That's how they go to science. That's how they deal with historians. So they will go to Bart Ehrman or any of these other guys, find something that agrees with a point they're trying to make. You see, this is the proof, even if everything else that the person says completely contradicts Islam. They do not care. That's the methodology. And once again, guys, that methodology could be used to defend absolutely any position. You could defend any position. It doesn't matter how ridiculous it is. You could defend any prophet. You could defend anything using that method. I could say that I'm a prophet. I could say that IP is a prophet and use that method to prove that we're prophets. We're just going to go anywhere and find anything that agrees with us being prophets, and we're going to ignore everything else. Anyone could use that method. And if you have a method, if your main method that you use to defend Muhammad as a prophet is a method that could be used to defend literally any position ever, namely, we just ignore everything that refutes us and just fixate on something that agrees with us and that we can twist. If that's the only method you've got, a method that could be used to defend anything, you probably need a new method, but you don't want one, because if you had an actual method that is designed to get you to the truth, you'd be out of Islam, and you don't want to do that, do you?
Yeah, I've often said, even if I were to ever deconvert with Christianity, which is unlikely at this point, the last thing I'd become is a Muslim. I just, the things you got to believe, man. I mean, if anything, if like the angel Gabriel came down and convinced, I'd have to be like an Ismaili or something, because like I could not be the traditional like Sunni or Salafi. It's just, whoo boy, the things you got to believe. You can't get over the fact that Jesus is crucified. That's just an historical fact.
Yeah, I've always I've been telling people for a few years now, if you guys ever see me convert to Islam, it's because I concluded that God doesn't exist and I became an atheist. But I realized as an atheist that the easiest group to grift in the world and to become super rich would be the Muslim crowd. And I would just say, so guys, if I ever become an atheist, what I'm going to do is I'm going to suddenly say, wow, you know, after examining the Bible and the Quran, I've concluded the Quran has to be from God. And I'm starting my great Dawah ministry right now. And, well, I'd be living in Neuschwanstein Castle after a couple of years.
Yeah, that's definitely, yeah, I totally get what you mean. Thank you for the super chat, Coco. Could you respond to the channel Mindshift? I'd have to take a look at his channel. I'm not familiar with who that is. But yeah, I could take a look.
Cool name, though.
Maybe do something. Yeah, it's a very cool name. Yeah. So in the chat, we have Angry IP. We have Sus IP. And earlier, I can't find it now, but there was Beardless IP earlier. So there's a lot of IPs running in the chat, run by this one super fan of mine who likes to troll me with various faces of me. So welcome one person here who I'm pretty sure is one person. That's what I got to put up with. That's what I got to put up with.
Too many IPs.
Oh, no. All right. Ready to get back to the video?
It's going to be powerful.
Let's see here. Powerful. All right. He's going to get into some other arguments here, which are pretty easy to address.
If he was born without a father, yes.
Immaculate conception.
You can call it that.
Right.
We also believe Adam was born without a father or mother.
Of course.
And we believe Eve was born without a father or mother, all miraculously by the order of God. Doesn't make any of them God.
No one else.
Pause it.
Eve.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah, just to be clear, the Christian claim that Jesus is the Son of God is not just, he didn't have a father, therefore he's the Son of God. But the Muslim, we believe that he's the Son of God for a bunch of reasons. Some of them being that he claimed it and that he's the one who rose from the dead, and so we take his claim seriously. But we always get this response from Muslims, but Adam didn't have a father either. And so does that make him son of God or this or that? Guys, God created Adam and Eve. If you go with the standard creation account, God created Adam without a father or mother. Why? Of necessity. If there is no father and mother there, he would have to create him. He would have to create him without a father or a mother. If then Allah is going to create Eve, then how is he going to create Eve? Well, he would either have to just create Eve separately as well, or create Eve from Adam. Those are the only options on the table. So it's of necessity. By the time you get to Jesus, you don't need that anymore. In other words, it had to be that way then. It doesn't. By the time of Jesus, there's husbands and wives are entirely capable of having children. Why did Jesus not have a father? We understand why Adam didn't have a father. Why did Jesus not have a father? Why did he have a miraculous birth? By the way, there's no answer in Islam. There's no explanation. It's just Allah knows best.
Yeah, it's weird. And yeah, the reason we believe Jesus is God is because he said he was God in places like Matthew 7:21, Luke 6:46, John 8:58. The Gospel of Mark opens by telling us that Jesus is the divine name, Adonai, because it says that someone's going to come and prepare a way for the Lord to come. And then John the Baptist prepares a way for Jesus to come. The implication Mark is telling us is who comes after John is the divine name, Adonai. So yeah, if Jesus said he wasn't God, he was a created being, Christians would not believe he is God, but because he taught it, because it's throughout the Gospels, it's in Paul's epistles, then it's also in the early church. We see Ignatius teaching this. We see Justin Martyr teaching this. We see Irenaeus teaching this. Tertullian teaches this. Clement of Alexandria teaches this. All the early church fathers, even the Didache, which dates to the 1st century, changes the liturgical formula, Hosanna to the Son of David, to Hosanna to the God of David. Okay, if you took a liturgical formula that has been used about Jesus, that's used in Matthew, and you change Son to God, what are you saying in the Didache? You're saying the Son is God. So this is why Christians believe Jesus is God. It has nothing to do with the virgin birth necessarily. That can be a part of it, but it's not the main argument we would use.
I just gave you no one else besides Adam, Eve, and Yeshua. But in the way of,
what does that matter? But Moses split the ocean. Nobody else split the ocean.
By God.
Yeah, exactly. And Jesus was born by the order of God. Muhammad split the moon by the order of God.
For the purpose of dying for our sins.
That is incorrect. I do not believe that.
That is correct.
I do not believe that. And the Jews don't believe that.
No, you're
right?
not. Obviously, you're not going to believe it because you believe the Bible.
Let me ask you. You said that
you're not going to believe
the connection of Jesus to David and Abraham is a part of Christian theology, right?
Sorry, say that again.
Jesus being from the lineage of King David.
Yeah.
Okay. So this lineage that's given, this is theology, because that would prove that he is the Messiah, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So now in that lineage, in Matthew, it says, and Jacob begot Joseph, the husband of Mary, to whom was born Jesus, who's called Christ. So who's the father of Joseph?
Father of Joseph? Jacob. Yeah.
Jacob. And that has to do with your belief, because that's what proves him to be the Messiah, right?
One of them, yeah.
Okay. So in the same Bible, in Luke, it says Jesus himself began his ministry at about 30 years of age as the supposed son of Joseph, the son of Heli. So who's the father of Joseph here?
Son of Heli.
So is it Jacob or Heli?
Could be translated different.
Okay, so there's an error there.
Could be, the name could be translated different, or it could be in a different language.
But then they're all.
So let's stop it right there. So this is a common argument that has been used for a long time. The idea that, oh, the genealogies in Matthew and Luke are different, therefore the Bible is an error. And I always have to remind people tend to have two parents. So you have two genealogies. And if you read both Gospels, Matthew and Luke, Matthew is focusing on the story from Joseph's perspective. The angel shows up to Joseph in a dream, tells him about this. We don't hear from Mary's perspective. Likewise, in Luke, we hear Mary's perspective. The angel announces the conception to her. We don't hear much from Joseph. What is the likely explanation? Well, if you read the recent book by Luke Vandewey, his book, The Historical Tell, he makes the case that Luke, when he was traveling in Judea, would have gotten this information from Mary or from James, who was the son of Mary. If you're Catholic, it would have been like this, the adopted son from Joseph's prior marriage, but you get the idea. So you have that basic aspect there. The argument that Darrell Bach presents in his two-part commentary on Luke is quite easily resolves this. It's in the ancient world, especially in Judea, you needed an heir to carry on your name. If you only had daughters, you still needed an heir because it was very much about carrying on the name. We see this in the Old Testament as well, especially around the Babylonian captivity. If you look at some of those names in there, then you go back to Chronicles, they have different fathers because some of these men become the legal heir, like Shealtiel, I believe, is one of those names. So you have this concept of legal heir. If Mary's father, we don't know much about, didn't have any sons of his own, Joseph by default would just become his legal heir. So he could have two fathers whose name he would be carrying on. That is perfectly consistent. Right now, I only have a daughter. If she were to marry an only child, both sets of parents would consider that child they have to be the heir of both families. That's just the way you would look at that kind of thing. That's who we'd leave inheritance to. The same would apply in the ancient world, especially with the amount of death that happened in the ancient world. So many people didn't make it to 25 due to disease, death in childbirth, various aspects, malnutrition. So as Amram Trooper points out in his paper, that a lot of people would have multiple kids, like 3 to 6. Only 1 or 2 would make it to adulthood, especially if you were of the poor, like Mary and Joseph were. So it's very likely that Heli just didn't have any sons to carry on his name. Therefore, he would take his son-in-law, Joseph, as his legal heir.
Yeah, and even, I mean, my goodness, think about how many genealogies you could write for either one of us. Like if you actually like studied our family tree and you were just tracing a family line, it's called a family tree for a reason. It has tons of branches and so on. But if you're saying son of so-and-so, son of so-and-so, you pick a line to follow. And lots of things can go on with those with picking a particular line, depending on which ancestors you're trying to emphasize. But I mean, you could easily, I mean, if you just traced our families back several generations, you could easily make 1,000 different genealogies for each of us.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, this is some great refutation of the Bible. Like, look at the grins on their faces. Oh, we got you. Oh. By the way, you could do the same thing with the genealogies of Muhammad, ladies and gentlemen. You got the same issue. If it's a problem, throw out your hadiths with your genealogies of Muhammad. And of course, they have the fact that the Quran affirms the inspiration and the preservation and the authority of the Gospels that we read. And he's sitting there mocking them, and they don't understand it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you take a look at Matthew's genealogy and compare it to what you see in Chronicles, you're going to see evidence of legal errors when you start getting to the names around the Babylonian captivity. So you need to take that in consideration when you're looking at this. This is not as clear-cut when you get into those kinds of things, because when they attacked, when the Babylonians took over Jerusalem and basically destroyed it, a lot of people died. So let me give you an example here. And I remember this one. It's Zerubbabel is who I'm thinking of. So let me see if I can share my screen here so I can show you what I mean. Here we go. So let's go to Matthew's genealogy starting here. So if you go here, you have, and Shealtiel was the father of Zerubbabel. If you just put Zerubbabel up in here, it'll take you to 1 Chronicles 3:19. It says the sons of Pedaiah, Zerubbabel and Shimei, or Shimei, whatever that is. If you go down to Ezra 3, it says Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, like Matthew says. So what's going on here? Well, it's very common in the ancient world to have a legal heir if you didn't have any sons to carry on your name. And sometimes someone like Zerubbabel would carry on multiple names because of death, war, disease, malnutrition, these kinds of things. So you can have this kind of thing with Joseph as well, carrying on the lineage of 2 lines. And so this is why it's pretty common for scholars, like, for example, Darrell Buck, to propose the idea that Heli didn't have any sons of his own, so it would just be natural for Joseph to carry on that name in his line, as well as his own father's. So that would be pretty common. That was just something that often happened in the ancient world. So, all right, you want to get back into that video? We'll finish it out because there's one more aspect I think that I just wanted to address in there.
Hey, one second. We got Answering Christians 1 in the chat. Hey, Etisham, is that you? Is that you, Etisham?
I think that sounds familiar. Yeah.
Is that Etisham? Yeah. No, Etisham, like longer than I've known most people that I know right now. Hey, Etisham, I've extended the invitation. I've extended the invitation to Shaykh Uthman. So has Inspiring Philosophy here. That if he would like to debate either of us, we are entirely open to that. But Eteshem, if Shaykh Uthman will not agree, and trust me, he won't. If you'd like to come on this Friday is Good Friday. If you want to join me on my channel this Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, to have a discussion about the evidence for the death of Jesus, or your view of the death of Jesus, or whatever, go ahead and send me a message. Happy to have you on.
Yeah, I won't be able to do that because this is Holy Week, so I'm Monday, Thursday service, Good Friday service.
You heard it here. You heard it here, folks. He believes that actually defending Jesus' death by crucifixion on Good Friday is unholy. He said it's unholy for me to be doing that on Good Friday.
Oh, no, it's part of the church I attend. So I got church Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, and then, of course, Sunday morning because it's Holy Week. So I will be busy with that because He says
yes. Answering Eteshem says yes. So all right, Eteshem, send me a message and we will set it up. Check your internet connection, make sure it's good.
Awesome. And here is one of the creepiest images I think I've ever seen in my entire life.
Beardless IP.
I should screenshot that and show my wife so she knows why I'm never shaving again. Because, good God, I don't know what to do with that. I'm terrified of that. I look like I'm 12. Oh God!
See, when I heard your voice in your videos before you started putting yourself on it, that's exactly what I thought you looked like.
I get it. Yes, that's exactly what I did look like when I was in the military and I had to shave. It was horrifying. People were wondering if I was like an ROTC or something, but no, I was like, I'm in the Air Force, I swear. And so horrible bad memories from that. So. All right, let's play out this last argument because this is one of my favorite things to debunk here.
All in Koine Greek, bro. You know that, right? These are in Koine Greek. And if you go through the lineage, each one of them is different. In fact, the number...
Look at this dope behind him just smiling. That's who, by the way,
okay.
That's who Uthman surrounds himself with. He surrounds himself with all these guys that like laughing and great point.
Yeah, it's a really bad point. It shows you don't understand the Hebrew use of gematria and genealogies. Matthew's actually doing something quite in line with Hebrew genealogies. Matthew arranges his genealogy in 3 sets of 14. He leaves out a bunch of names on purpose because it was perfectly consistent for you to say this was the son of X is the son of Y, and it could be his great-great-grandfather. That was common in Hebrew genealogy. Matthew's doing something different. He's arranging his genealogy in 3 sets of 14. Abraham to David, 14. David down to the exile, 14. Exile to Jesus, 14. Because 14 is the number of David in gematria. So you take 3 letters of David's name, you add them up, it's 464. You get 14, which is what he's doing. He's using Hebrew gematria to point out that Jesus is the son of David. So there's nothing he's doing here. It's not that he's not contradicting Luke necessarily. He's doing something on purpose to show that he's going to use a genealogy to point again to Jesus being the son of David.
I acknowledge it.
So you acknowledge the mistake there, which has to
not a mistake. It's perspective. You just don't understand the Hebrew context.
Do with your theology.
But that has nothing to do with But
it does. Because for him to be the Messiah that was prophesied, he'd had to be from the lineage of King David. And if that lineage is a mistake, then that there, my brother, in humanity is theology. And it's a clear error in front of your eyes, in your own book. You've already admitted there's errors, but now you have to admit there are errors related to... Now, when the resurrection happened, that's a part of theology, right? The resurrection of Jesus.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah, that's part of theology.
Part of your belief, right? Okay. So when the resurrection happened, according to you, right? Now, after the Sabbath, as the first day of the week began to dawn, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to see the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake. So what happened when they went there?
A great earthquake.
And an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat on it. Okay? Yeah. And then Mary and the other Mary spoke to him, but the angel answered and said to the woman, do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. So what happened here? They went, and then there was an earthquake, and then in front of them an angel came and rolled back the stone and spoke to them. Is that correct? Now in the same Bible, now on the first, I'm sorry?
Luke, yeah.
Yeah, Luke, same Bible, different author. Now on the first day of the week, very early in the morning, they and certain other women, not just Mary and the other women with them, came to the tomb bringing spices which they had prepared. But they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. No angel, no earthquake, stone's already gone. Those contradict. Right there. Now,
so Mike Licona has addressed this in detail. This is not a contradiction. This is, once again, not understanding the literary genre of ancient Greco-Roman biographies. In that culture, if you're writing a biography, it would be very common to use literary devices like transplanting, spotlighting, these kinds of things to tell the story. That's not an error. That's just a literary device. It's like if I told you a story and I said, yeah, I went to a wedding and I saw them cut the cake. I saw them walk down the aisle. I saw them say their vows and there was dancing. I didn't give you anything in a chronological order. I gave you basically hits of events that happened. And what Mike Licona argues in his book, Why There Are Differences in the Gospels, is that what Matthew is doing is summarizing this and just sort of giving you the gist of what could have happened. The way you read Matthew does not necessarily say the women had to see the angel come down and do this. It's the idea that he just sort of transplants the events, summarizing it all so that he can explain what happened, that an angel rolled the stone away. Then you get to Luke and John, and I think John is giving us more of like the exaggerated, the details of the story and the chronological aspect, whereas Matthew just sort of summarizing the events of the resurrection as best he can. So again, you just can't assume error, because what this is a case of misreading scripture with Western modern eyes. You got to apply it in the culture that it was written in. And it would be perfectly normal for them to rearrange events on the timeline, summarize these kinds of things. Again, that's not error. That's just you're missing the actual ancient perspective on this.
By the way, you can do the that's what sucks. He's never talking to people who will point this out, but you can do the exact same thing with the Quran, like the story of Satan rebelling and so on. You can go to multiple versions of the same story in the Quran, and it'll be, oh, then Satan said this, and it'll be different from what Satan said in a different passage. And what would a Muslim say? Well, it's emphasizing different things and picking out different things that were said and so on. And they're totally fine with that. They're totally fine with that when their sources do it. When your sources do it, then it's a huge contradiction, and you can't trust the source that Allah tells us to judge by anyway. Yeah,
tells us to judge by the gospel. So, all right, got a super chat here. That's where I had some cite critical scholarship in regards to dating critical scholars and attempting to now put Luke into the 2nd century. Oh, okay. So TikTok theologic. I know what you're talking about here. So it's a minority view. It is not the main view among critical scholars. Most want to date Luke to the 80s, maybe the late 70s. That's where they place Luke. There is a minority view, like Steve Mason, Richard Purvo, which is the most ironic name ever because he got in trouble for looking at pictures of children, and his last name is Purvo anyway. But they argued that Luke should date to the 2nd century because they tried to make this argument that Luke was reliant on the writings of Josephus. The problem with that is their evidence is quite flimsy. It's based on little things around like the sequence we see in Theudas, or the sequence on the road to the disciples on the road to Emmaus, I believe is what I'm thinking of, or Paul being confused with the Egyptian prophet that happens in the book of Acts. Little things like this, they say they're following Josephus's sequence. And Carl Armstrong has written a book on Acts, and he just goes into detail and shows like it's a problematic here. Why would Luke not copy this aspect of Josephus if he's copying this aspect? We know Luke liked to cite things like this. He would not miss this opportunity if Josephus was in front of him. And if you look at Jonathan Bernier's book, Rethinking the Dates of the New Testament, he makes a very strong case that Luke's in Acts has to date to the 60s based on the sequence we see in there. Therefore, Mark also has to date prior to that because Luke is using Mark as a source. So, no, that's a very minority view. And Steve Mason, Richard Purvo have not convinced a lot of scholars of that. So even if you reject Jonathan Bernier's arguments, more critical scholars are going to still date Luke and Acts to the 1st century, not the 2nd century. And if you want to see the video I did, check out the recent video I did in this month called Why the Gospels Are Early. And I go into more detail on that. So you can check that out. I'm sure David has nothing to add because that's not his area unless he has something he wants to say.
No.
I didn't think so. Thank you, Esther, for becoming a channel member. Much appreciated. IP would be an Islamic Neoplatonist. I'm not a
if you converted,
Neoplatonist.
He's saying if you converted to Islam, you would have to be an Islamic Neoplatonist. So that's Khalil Andani's position.
Yeah, I'd have to go in that direction because I can't find the traditional Sunni or Salafi position reasonable.
You wouldn't be
Addison,
a diehard Salafi?
God, no. Kill me before that happened. Apologeticon David said that the Quran denies the crucifixion. Here and other places, he argues it's unclear. Why the inconsistency? No disrespect.
Well, because that is the dominant position. And anytime I say it's unclear, I get objections from Muslims. Liar, you're a liar. Well, actually, no matter what I say about the crucifixion of Jesus, I get called a liar with respect to the Quran. So, yeah, when I say that the Quran denies the crucifixion, that is the position of roughly 99% of Muslims. Well, I don't know, because you do have Ismaili Shias, but yeah, they're pretty small. That's a pretty small percentage of the.
Seems to be around 90, I'd say. I mean, Ahmadis don't take that he died by crucifixion, but I mean,
yeah, I'd have to. I mean, as far as Muslims who aren't regarded as heretical in some way, you're talking about 99% of Muslims take the position that Allah replaced Jesus with someone else. It seems like as far as ones I've encountered. So, guys, when I say there's a position you could argue almost anything. I mean, if I'm saying that Muhammad did something, keep in mind, I can point out that it's not entirely clear and that there are people who don't even believe Muhammad existed. You can always point out that there is an alternative position there. So it kind of depends. If I'm saying what the position of the Quran is, do I want to go with the dominant position of Islam down through the centuries and say that this is what the Quran teaches? Or do I want to point out and go on a tangent and say, actually, though, there is a minority position that doesn't say this. It's just, I don't know. Depends on what the situation is.
Yeah. Mike, love your inspiring philosophy. Christian Prince covered one of your shorts debunking his Sheikh. He said you're doing great work and to go support you. Well, much appreciated. I've never talked to Christian Prince, but I do appreciate him doing that. So yeah, give him my thanks, and hopefully I get to eventually speak with him someday. Thank you for your $10 super chat. Much appreciated. Yo, Uthman, Jews don't believe Mo to be their prophet either. Yeah, that's another good point. Like, why does Uthman keep citing Jews when they're not going to accept his stuff either? Like, doesn't work.
Yep. But that ties right back into what we were saying about how they'll use the Bible. It could be contradicts Islam. They'll fixate on something that they think agrees with Islam. Same methodology with scholars. And guess what? Same methodology with Jews. If you say, if a Jew says, hey, I agree with something about Islam, you see, Jews are the authority in these matters, and therefore we all need to submit to them. If they say, hey, Muhammad's a false prophet, don't listen to Jews, you can never trust them. That's just welcome to Dawah, ladies and gentlemen.
I got an exciting super chat for you. Coco says, I used to be a keyboard jihadist, blocked by David 5 times, LMAO. Now I'm an Orthodox Christian because of you too. Video on history of apostles. Well, that is some of the best news I've ever heard. I wish I had a clap sound I could play. Oh, does that come in this at all? No, I just have these weird musics I can play.
Like, no, you got to get one of these. You got to get one of these little sound boxes, man. One of these little things. You put whatever sounds you want on it.
This is all I got is this dance pop music.
Matter of fact, I should put some applause on here. That'd be cool.
Yeah, that's all I got. Okay.
That's pretty much the worst thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, video on the history of apostles. I'd like to know what specifically, like what happened to them. So, Steve, who's done actually some stuff on this is Sean McDowell. Did his dissertation on this and wrote a book on it. And notes a lot of the history is a little iffy. We're not entirely sure what happened to a lot of the apostles. We know Peter and Paul were martyred in Rome. There's a lot of good evidence to support that. We know James, the disciple of Jesus, was killed by, I believe, Herod, not Archelaus, Herod Agrippa in Jerusalem. We know James the Just was martyred in Jerusalem. Josephus talks about that. So, I mean, we have some history on some of them, but some of them, like Bartholomew or Thomas, we're not entirely sure. It'd be interesting to cover the stories on that. So maybe that's something I can look into.
And that's something that Sean does. He sort of grades the sources, because we have sources. We have sources on all these guys. It's just sometimes you're getting later and later and later with the sources, and all of a sudden you're into the 3rd century saying something about, and so it's something. It can show that there's a tradition about it, but yeah, generally the further away you get from events, if you're hearing about it from the first time, in other words, if there's no mention from it in the 1st century, and no one, not even commentators and so on, mention it in the 2nd century, and all of a sudden a story pops out in the 3rd century. Again, it could be correct, but you have to be a little bit skeptical. And it ties in what we were saying earlier about Islam's sources start 2 centuries after the time of Jesus, as far as what they actually use. They go to, after Muhammad. Their best sources are sources from more than 2 centuries after the time of Muhammad. So you can see the kind of differences we're talking about when we're examining the life of Jesus.
Yeah, and it doesn't work for Christian sources, because some will try to say, well, the manuscripts only date to the 3rd century. Yeah, there's no scholar that dates it based on the first or oldest manuscript we find. We've had like church fathers like Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, Ignatius quoting the New Testament documents. You have the Didache quoting Matthew, and I believe parts of Luke. We have all the internal evidence to support this as well, that these documents date to the 1st century. And so, yeah, even very critical scholars will still date the New Testament to the 1st century. So, all right, I want to play this last argument from Shaykh Uthman, because this is just another case of just, cherry picking the Bible to fit the conclusion you want.
If that's not enough, we could keep going. Like I said, I have 100 more. Now, on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb by herself. No other woman, no Mary. Early, while it was still dark, and saw that the stone had been taken away.
He didn't keep
reading?
No,
he didn't. He stopped right there. No.
Wait, is that the same? Is that the same passage that if you keep reading, Mary shows up and says, "We don't know where they laid him"? And is that the same thing there?
Yeah, that's the passage there. Yeah, let me put this up here really quickly. Yeah. If you go here, it says, now the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early while it was still dark and saw that the stone had been taken away. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and to the other disciples, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, they have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him. Now, she's not talking about herself in a royal plural. She didn't do that. She is talking about the other women who went there. And John is just spotlighting Mary. Again, see Mike Lacona's book, Why There Are Differences in the Gospels, which Muslims should read to better understand how the Gospels were written. It's very common, especially in Plutarch's writings, to spotlight one character at an event and not mention the others that were there. No one would look at this as an error or John saying there weren't other women who went to the tomb. They would have understood this technique quite easily, that he was just spotlighting Mary Magdalene. Again, not an error.
Guys, just think about what Shaykh Uthman just did there. So if you missed it, right? He's saying, look, the other Gospels talk about women showing up to the tomb, plural, women, multiple women showing up at the tomb. And then, look right there, we're reading John. It says Mary Magdalene went there. You see, it's just Mary Magdalene. Just Mary Magdalene. See, it's another contradiction. You can't trust this stuff. You can't trust the Bible. You can't trust it. Look, it says over here, it says multiple women. Here, it just says Mary Magdalene. You see, clear contradiction. If you just keep reading, when Mary leaves, she goes back and says, we don't know where they laid him. We, plural. And by the way, what IP was just pointing out there, that you can kind of focus on one part. Notice John does this throughout the Gospel of John. He tends to zero in on a specific discussion with a specific person to emphasize a particular person's reaction to something. He does this with the woman at the well. You don't have that elsewhere. He does that with Nicodemus. He does it here with Mary. This happens over and over again in the Gospel of John. Somehow, you see, you just can't trust that Jesus died by crucifixion. That's welcome. Welcome to Tao. It's the dumbest methodology I could ever imagine, and it's like standard.
It's like you have this video of Shaykh Uthman, and they just can't. They have to commit at least one lie or one example of cherry picking. Like they got to do that every time. They just can't be honest about what the text says to push this agenda. And of course, the Christian, who's probably not going to be able to know these tactics right then and there, is not going to be able to understand it, so he doesn't in the video. But if you just keep reading the text, you'll see these little indicators. But same tactic over and over again. David, we got a super chat. I'm sure you can answer. How is the growth of Islam in the last decade?
You mean this past decade?
I think so. Yeah.
I didn't know if he meant like the last decade on Earth or something like that.
No.
As far as this past decade, the main growth of Islam is high birth rates. That's what it is, and Islam's growth is based on. Matter of fact, when you heard Muslims running with this argument, Islam is the fastest growing religion, that means it's true. That's stupid on multiple levels. Something growing rapidly does not mean that it's true. I mean, communism was one of the fastest spreading movements in all of history. It doesn't mean that it's true. You can make a very similar argument. You can say, well, Christianity is the biggest religion, therefore it must be true. No Muslim is going to accept that. But they all ran with, Islam is the fastest growing religion, because of a Pew study, which said that Islam is the world's fastest growing religion. If you actually look at the study, it specifically said it's because of high birth rates in Muslim countries and Muslim communities. Even Muslims in the West tend to have higher birth rates. If you start looking into why Islam has the highest birth rates, you start finding out that this is because of Islam's impact on women. If your entire goal for women is to turn them into baby making machines, then guess what? If they're not going to, in Afghanistan, girls ain't going to school for very long. The goal is to marry them off as quickly as possible. And guess what? They start having kids at 13, 14, 15, 16, and so on. By the time a woman in the West is having her first child at 27 or 30 or 33, the Muslim woman is on her 10th or 11th child. And so that's a recipe for high growth rates among Muslims, and that is the main source of the growth of Islam. But what you've also had over the past decade is that what they call, we didn't come up with this, they called it the avalanche of apostasy. From about 2005 to about 2020, the apostasy rate for young Muslims went from close to 0% to 24, 25%. So that is extremely rapid growth in the rate of apostates. And that's actually tied to a lot of what's going on in the world. The Muslim scholars, as much as they thump their chest and we're growing so rapidly, we're going to take over the world, as much as they thump their chest, they're looking at this apostasy rate just skyrocketing, and they're in a panic mode because the apostasy rate is soon going to pass the birth rate, and the birth rates are not going to be able to deal with the apostasy rate. And so basically overall, the situation is, if you go back 20 years, your average Muslim who is aware of the growth of Islam could be thinking to himself, this was pretty standard back then. We could sit back and do nothing and we win. We don't have to do anything and we win just by birth rates. 50 years from now, we're going to have the biggest numbers in the world. And so all we have to do is sit back and do nothing. We don't want to sit back and do nothing. We want to accelerate the process. But even if we sit back and do nothing, we eventually win. That was the position 20 years ago. The position now is, if we sit back and do nothing, we lose. We lose because the apostasy rate is going to be canceling out the high birth rates, and we're going to lose. So they're in a panic mode, and a ton of the stuff that people are confused about in the world, like, why are they doing this? This is insane. Like, why are they clinging to people like Muhammad Hijab and Ali Dawa and Daniel Hakikachu who are running around, child marriage, we want child brides and stuff like that? Why are they clinging to these guys? Because they're desperate right now. They're desperate what are we going to do about the massively accelerating apostasy rates? We have to do something. We have to do it right now. You can't wait 10 years. 10 years, what's the apostasy rate going to be? 40%, 50%, 60%? What's it? You can't wait until then. They're in panic mode right now about the future of Islam. And so they're clinging to absolutely anything. And any dawah guy, guys, if you want to be a complete grifter, become a dawah guy right now. They will rally around you and shower you with attention and money right now, if that's the route you want to go. So they're in a panic mode. So dawah is one direction of going. Any dawah guy who stands up right now, I'm going to save your future generations of children from becoming apostates. I will stick you to the kuffar. You're going to be their new hero. But there's another direction people are going in. And this is what you see with Iran and Hamas and the resurgence of ISIS. They're in a panic mode too. They understand we cannot wait 10 or 20 years. It's too late. A study a few years ago showed that 40% of people in Iran still believe in Islam. 40%. It's a Muslim minority nation, if that study is correct. Now that could be somewhat biased because it was an online poll. So there could be villages and so on that don't have internet access or something like that are skewed. Point is, you're still dealing with, let's say half, to be generous and say it's skewed somewhat. You're talking about half the population doesn't even believe in Islam anymore. If you're Iranian leaders, you're looking at that going, we cannot continue like this. It's going to be too late. What do you have to do? You have to set things off. So Iran pushes the button on Hamas to launch a terrorist attack. They're trying everything they can to consolidate Muslims. So notice the goal. We'll have Hamas launch an attack against Israel. Israel will retaliate. This will put Muslims in the world in a defensive position. Oh no, we're being attacked right now, and hopefully we could deal with the apostasy problem. But so anyway, yeah, you have still had the growth of Islam because of the birth rates, but the apostasy rates are catching up with it, and Muslims are in a state of panic right now.
Yeah, the internet has been getting a lot of information out. So I mean, I've been contacted by ex-Muslims on this channel in private who have left Islam. I've talked to a guy in Lebanon who is now an Orthodox Christian. We talked about the ex-keyboard jihadist earlier, who is now an Orthodox Christian. So praise God, good things are happening, and hopefully Islam will keep declining. Can Christians eat halal? From Sus IP. 1 Corinthians chapter 8 confuses me. I don't want to eat halal, but just curious on the official stance. Also love you, IP. Thank you, alternate me and from another dimension. So chapter 10
would be more relevant, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it talks about that there too. 1 Corinthians 8 is about, like, if you're at a market and someone has sacrificed meat at the temple earlier and they're now selling it in the market, it's okay to eat it because there's nothing evil in it. But if it's going to cause someone to stumble, then you shouldn't. So it's all about positioning yourself so that you're helping your brother or your sister grow. But if it's not going to hurt anyone, it's not going to hurt you, because we know these are just idols. I would say, if you got meat that's been made halal and you don't know, that's not a problem. I wouldn't seek it out, but I don't think there's anything wrong with eating it from a Christian standpoint, because we know it doesn't do anything to us. Like, it has no power over the Holy Spirit that dwells in us. So I don't really see that as an issue. What are your thoughts, David?
Yeah, in chapter 10, so you have the passage, flee from idolatry and stuff. And anyway, verses 23 to 31, all things are lawful, but not all things are profitable. So this is the continuation of chapter 8. All things are lawful, but not all things edify. Let no one seek his own good, but that of his neighbor. Eat anything that is sold in the meat market without asking questions for conscience sake.
Yeah.
So some of this food would have been sacrificed to idols. Paul says, eat any of that stuff without any sort of question for conscience. What that means is Paul doesn't actually care if something is sacrificed to an idol. He doesn't care because the idol is nothing. He just doesn't care. His issue is, what about other people who are seeing this and they have issues of conscience for it? So what happens if someone brings it up? You're at an unbeliever's house and they bring out some food. He says, go ahead and eat it. What's the problem? What's the problem? As long as no one brings it up. What if there's some Christian there say, hey, I got a problem with this because this is food sacrificed to an idol or something like that. Then you need to be careful, because now you're dealing with someone else. So yeah, I think the same. matter of fact, I wouldn't even say it's the same thing with halal. Halal means allowed or permissible.
Right.
So it's not, hey, this is, this has to be in the name of, you're eating this in the name of Allah or something like this. It just means it's allowed. The way it's prepared, it's allowed for Muslims to eat it. But I think it would be a similar situation, and that if you're in a market and some food is halal certified or something like this, it shouldn't be a huge issue. If other people are concerned about that, or no, keep it. By the way, little side note: you could be concerned about halal food for other reasons. If you're talking about the way the animals are treated or something like that, I'm talking specifically about whether this is how this ties into what Paul says in 1 Corinthians, where the issue is food sacrifice to some other deity or something like that, and the potential impact on your fellow Christians. So again, you could have all sorts of other reasons. You could not want to fund the Islamic meat industry or something like that. You could not want to do that. You might not want to put money into halal certification and stuff like that. You could have all sorts of reasons, or because of animal cruelty, you could have all kinds of reasons. From the perspective of what Paul's saying in 1 Corinthians, doesn't look like it's a huge issue if you're consuming it. Paul doesn't care about whether something is about the name of Allah being pronounced over something. If it's going to be an issue to other Christians, then you should pay attention to that.
Got a $50 super chat here. You want to read that one? Because I probably will butcher those names if I take that
out. David and Michael, I cannot verify any use of the word tawheed to include the Quran and earliest hadith before the 10th century Islamic theologian Abu Mansur al-Mutaridi of Central Asia and his work Kitab Tawheed. Please investigate. I will. I know that's a standard response to the claim, but the word Trinity isn't in the Bible, and people, well, the word Tawheed is not in the Quran, so what are you going there? But yeah, I haven't investigated when the earliest appearances of the word, but yeah, that would be a good little research project there.
Yeah, and that's comparable to Trinity not being in the Bible, for example. But I do really appreciate the $50 super chat. Much appreciated. Picture of David Wood there, called Obey, says, "This conversation is why, as a pastor, I listen to you all and read. So when my congregation runs into these people, I have a response." Well, that's good, David Wood from an alternative universe. Glad to see you're a pastor there and that you're utilizing material from this universe. That's good to see.
By the way, that's an incredibly important point right there. And just talked about this down at Apologeticon. We can tell you the main objections that Muslims are going to bring up in any discussion. Christians think it's going to be a ton. It's not. It's a small handful of objections that Muslims are trained to bring up over and over and over again. For the life of me, I don't understand why. If we know exactly what Muslims are going to bring up, how are Christians not trained? Muslims are trained to attack Christianity. I have no idea, once you know what the attacks are going to be, how Christians are just not trained to respond. So it's good that you're training your congregation to respond.
From Goat Hub, love your content, IP. We also inspire people.
It's the most important. It's the most popular website in Pakistan, Goat Hub.
I think Muhammad's ancestor was Mani of Parthia and therefore was justified to conquer Manichaean lands. Prove me wrong, infidels, unless you're afraid. I have no clue on Muhammad's ancestry.
No, we can't. So you're right. We're going to convert to Islam now.
You got us. Why do the apostles have English-sounding names?
You remember when that came up in you responded to that, didn't you? When the guy's like, "Oh, you're going around the Middle East and found people named Andrew and Peter." Come on, guys.
Yeah. You mean like yeah.
Well, no, it's just hilarious that this person actually was thinking like, "Oh, come on, why do they have all these English names?" Clearly, this is a later fabrication, as if people who spoke English in the 15th century are making these stories up and putting English names in there. My goodness.
No, it's called transliterating. You transliterate names. It was Yeshu that was transliterated into Jesus, which is in the New Testament in the Greek form. The New Testament authors transliterated a name, Jesus's name. We've transliterated as well. Jesus didn't find Matthew. He found Matthias. He didn't find John. He found Johannan. He didn't find James. He found Jacob. Okay. These are the actual names that we've just transliterated over time. That's just a common practice that we do in every culture. And the New Testament does it because it's written in Greek. Jesus' name would have been Yeshu. They transliterated it as Jesus. So yeah, there's no issue there. Those not English names. Uthman checks all the boxes for the cliche, slimy, manipulative salesman. His videos are insufferable. I just laugh. I just go through his videos. I'm like, are you serious, man? Like, stop talking to people on the street and debate someone who actually can defend these positions that you want to bring up. But
won't do it.
No, not at all. Hi, let us read Sahih Muslim 146. Love you, GBU, IP, and DW. What is Sahih Muslim 146?
Not sure. There are multiple numbering systems for I have two different versions of Sahih Muslim. I'll go with this one. It is narrated on the authority of Ibn Umar that the Messenger of Allah observed, verily Islam started as something strange, and it would again revert to its old position of being strange just as it started, and it would recede between the two mosques just as the serpent crawls back into its hole. Yeah, it's good. It's one of those good prophecies. AP loves that one. Hey, we should start doing it. Hey, Muslims, hey, why don't you have your religion crawl back into its hole like a snake, just like your prophet said? A matter of fact, I don't know why I don't use that one more, because I have certain we just tend to go with super funny ones like the eyes or the leather strap of the anus and things like that. But no, this is a good one. This is a very good one that should be used.
Yeah. Quran 1928, Jesus' mother is the same as Moses' sister. Yeah, that's a popular objection brought up to the Quran. I mean, in there with some of the other bad ones, like claiming crucifixion existed in ancient Egypt.
Yeah, so the issue with Jesus' mom in the Quran is Miriam. So that's the sister of Aaron and Moses. In Arabic is the same as Mary. The name is the same as in Arabic as Mary, the mother of Jesus. The author of the Quran thought they're the same person, even though they are centuries apart. And so Muslims have to do some gymnastics to get around that one. But that's an interesting point as far as if you were to bring that up to Shaykh Uthman, he would have some explanations for that and would expect us to give the benefit of the doubt on that, even though it's very clear, because it doesn't just say, oh, they have the same name. It gives the same parent for both of them. So Miriam and Mary, the mother of Jesus, had the same name for their father. And then this issue gets brought up to Aisha in the hadith. Aisha had no clue that they weren't the same, wasn't referring to the same person. So you've got this issue, and it's a matter of when they have something to explain, any explanation, any reconciliation. So what they'll say is, no, Mary, the mother of Jesus, just happened to have a parent with the exact same name as Miriam, the sister of Aaron and Moses. And when it calls Mary, the mother of Jesus, the sister of Aaron, this is just some title that was given, some respectful title that was given to women. If you were a really good woman, they would call you sister of Aaron. And so they'll make a claim in order to explain why Mary, the mother of Jesus, is called the sister of Aaron. They'll make something up. But notice, you can then say, okay, if this was a common way of referring to pious women, show us other pious women who are called sister of Aaron. Where do you see this? And the answer is, you don't see it anywhere. You don't see it anywhere. They have no evidence for it. Why? Because they're making it up. But them making it up is supposed to be a sufficient proof when they definitely would not extend the same courtesy if a Christian were doing the same thing.
It's like them trying to make up a explanation for why the Quran says that the Jews thought Ezra was the son of God. Again, just no evidence for
even that. Even perfect example. Matter of fact, I should do the 10 biggest historical blunders in the Quran, something like that. But yeah, that's the same thing. The Quran, Surah 9, verse 30, says that Jews call Ezra the son of Allah, and Christians say that the Messiah is the son of Allah. So keep in mind, it's pointing out that we're doing the same thing there, but Jews do it with Ezra and Christians do it with Jesus. I've asked plenty of Jews about this. It's not, hey, do you actually call Ezra the son of of God. It's, have you ever even heard of this? Have you ever heard of anyone who's ever done this? They have no clue. They have absolutely no clue where this is coming from. If you ask Muslims like Shabir Ali, he quotes, I think he was quoting Tabari, who by that time knew Jews do not call Ezra the son of Allah. And I think it was Tabari who said this could have just referred to like one person or something, like maybe it's just referring to one person. When, keep in mind, according to the Quran, this is the justification for violently subjugating Jews. Surah 9, verse 29 is fight those who do not believe. And it talks about violently subjugating Jews and Christians until we pay the jizya. The explanation for why we have to be subjugated is in the very next verse. And it's Jews call Ezra the son of Allah, and Christians call the Messiah, the son of Allah. So you have that. But then if a Muslim wants to notice this doesn't work, to say it just applied to a particular group that we don't have any evidence for. Maybe it was just one person that we don't have any evidence for. And the Quran, Allah's directing all his energy into responding to this one person or this one group that none of us have ever heard of. You also have the hadith where Muhammad says that on the day of judgment, Allah is going to ask different groups about what they worshiped. And he's going to ask Christians, why did you worship Jesus? The same passage says that Jews are going to be asked why they worship Ezra. And so this is the blanket condemnation of Jews. The blanket condemnation of Jews that is going to be brought before them on Judgment Day is why they worshiped Ezra, and in the Quran, why they call Ezra the son of God. And I have not found the slightest bit of evidence for one Jew anywhere in all of history who calls Ezra the son of God and worships him.
That make a good skit. You have Jews on the day of judgment before Allah trying to explain that we never did that.
I like the way you think, IP. That is going to happen. That is going to be a good skit.
David, which early church fathers venerated as saints held the belief that Mary, the mother of Jesus, had other children after Jesus? I think I could answer that, unless you have any you could add.
No, my response would be, well, why would I care?
Yeah, so venerated as saints. So it wouldn't be Origen. Origen held to that idea. Was Hilary of 20 years? I don't know if he is venerated as a saint, but Athanasius, Epiphanius, I think Jerome is another one. Ambrose, those guys. I don't think that's a necessary belief for Christians to have. Holding the belief Mary was a perpetual virgin. It's a Catholic teaching. Believe it's I can't. But yeah, I don't think it's necessary. Christians take their old parents to Makaj. What does that mean?
Don't know.
I don't know what Makaj is. So, sorry, can't answer that one.
Don't know.
Thanks. What about Acts 15:29, that you abstain from all that has been sacrificed to idols? Would this passage change the official stance on halal? No. So in the creed that James sends out to the Gentile churches, he's more likely referring to the actually participating in some sort of idol worships that involved meat. And then Paul is specifically talking about meat you just buy at the market. So James seems to be talking about this practice of when you would get the meat directly from the idol because you're partaking in some sort of like pagan worship ceremony or ritual, that kind of thing. There are different scholarly takes on that for sure. But yeah, this is James is sort of just giving a summary, like stay away from idol worship and the food they have there, because people would go to these practices because there's food. And he's saying Christians, you got to stay away from that kind of stuff. So I don't think that's the same. I think James and Paul are talking about different things entirely when they're given their different explanations.
Yeah, and I would just say if it does bother you, then don't buy it.
Right.
Just
that's a good way to put it.
I can say for me, if my wife brought something home from the grocery store and I look and it said halal certified, I wouldn't care. I wouldn't care at all. And except again, there could be considerations about how the animals are treated or what I'm actually funding, but my concern would not be about Acts 15 or about 1 Corinthians 8 or 10.
Right. Yeah.
Unless you were over there and it did bother you, then it would become a concern.
Right. Ditto halal food chain employees Muslims exclusively. I'm not sure what that's referring to, but thank you for the super chat. Hey, P, what's the best historical argument for the empty tomb? Yeah, scripture talks about it, but what else does? So secular sources aren't going to mention that because they don't really care. The best argument for it is just using internal arguments to support the empty tomb. For one, it's multiply attested. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all attest to it. Dale Allison argues that it's definitely implied in Paul, because Paul says Jesus died and rose, and he would have left behind an empty grave. That's in his book, Resurrecting Jesus. So you have that. And there'd be no reason for the Christians to make it up. One, you have this idea that the women discovered the tomb, which is going to hurt their testimony in the ancient world, because the testimony of a woman was not as valued as much. You also have the idea that he was buried in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea of the Sanhedrin. The Christians are not going to make up a story about Jesus being buried in a tomb of their enemies, a member of the people that put Jesus to death. So I talk about some of this in my resurrection series that I did, I think, almost 10 years now ago at this point, where there's a lot of good evidence to support the early tomb tradition. Even Justin Martyr in his dialogue with Trypho says that the Jews are still going from city to city saying the disciples stole the body. That implies that the Jews still had this tradition that the tomb was empty and that the body was sort of taken away somehow. So there's independent evidence for it. What I'm doing now on my channel is I'm doing a series on the reliability of the Gospels, which I'm working through. Parts 1 through 6 are up. That means 6 more parts have to come out. And it shows over and over again the Gospels are reliable, early biographies that came from eyewitnesses, and we can trust their evidence. That's going to help also support the evidence for the early tomb. So that's what I'd use. How does halal food really relate to animal cruelty? Is it more cruel than regular non-halal food or kosher? I have no clue.
Yeah, lots of slashing the animals' throats while they're still conscious. You do have some pushes in certain halal preparation that want to stun them or something like that. But yeah, the standard halal method is to slice the animal's throat and let it bleed out right there. Yeah. So you have other things like where they put, sometimes they shock it, sometimes they put a thing into its head that kills it quickly. The goal is to be like not. You don't want the animal to suffer more than it needs to if you're killing the animal. And the halal way is, I mean, apart from just torturing the animal for fun or something like that, the halal way is on the more brutal end of the spectrum. So you might not want to do it for that reason.
Yeah, modern ways are definitely more humane. Where do I start for polemics and apologetics? Are you looking for videos on that kind of stuff? I mean, check out my channel or David's channel, Apologetics Roadshow or Act 17 Polemics. If that's what you're doing, yeah, you're right here. You're at the right place. Check out our channels. It'd be perfect.
It's also going to depend on what you're interested in. So there's some common ground that whatever you're doing in apologetics or whatever you should be learning a basic case for the existence of God, for Jesus' resurrection and divine nature. Apart from that, kind of depends on what direction you want to go in, whether you want to deal with atheist arguments or Muslim arguments or whatever. So yeah, I would say check out Greg Kokel's book, Tactics, because that's gonna come in handy whatever you do.
Yeah. All right. Can you only use the Septuagint because the New Testament uses the Septuagint a lot, not the Hebrew? What mistake, error, mistranslation, etc. exists in the Septuagint? Can the Septuagint stand alone and ditch Hebrew? So I think you can use the Septuagint. I think it's fine. I think if you want to have a more scholarly approach, use the Septuagint along with the Dead Sea Scrolls, along with the Masoretic. It's not gonna be one or the other. You really gotta explore the different manuscripts we have to understand, because sometimes scholars will say the Septuagint reading is probably more accurate than the Masoretic, and sometimes they'll say that the Masoretic reading is more accurate. And so, because the Septuagint is a Greek translation, it's good to use the Hebrew because you want to look at what the original words meant and better understand that. It's going to give you a better understanding of the language that was being used at the time and these kinds of things. So, yeah, I don't think. I mean, I got a Septuagint, I got Masoretic, I got a Dead Sea Scrolls Bible here. So, I try to look around at the different scholarly takes in the different manuscripts to get a better understanding. Hey, IP, how do I avoid getting shanked in prison? Well, Why would you ask me when David Wood is here? I've not been to prison.
Yeah, why?
How do you?
It doesn't make any sense.
I don't know. Don't go to prison. That's my answer.
Yeah, don't tick people off. Don't tick off the wrong person. And if you do, shank him first. What the heck?
Don't go to prison. That's how you avoid it. What do you think about
generally,
smoking?
It's different. It's different from place to place. So it would be different rules, like in, on the West Coast and East Coast. Generally, in most places in prison, if you don't have an attitude problem and you can get along with people. I never got shanked. And matter of fact, I never got shanked, and I talked quite a bit of trash. So,
what do you think about smoking? The Bible says, "Stay sober-minded," but I'm still sober when smoking tobacco. Need some clarity. I don't think there's anything wrong with it necessarily. So, yeah, I just I don't think it's healthy.
Yeah, that would be my concern. If you know it's not healthy, why would you do it?
One more. How pity Adab al Mufred 1115. I have no idea what that's referring to.
That's one of the works of Bukhari.
Oh, okay. I don't know what that says though. So, but I guess people can go check it out. Are you pulling it up?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up. When someone greets a Christian whom he does not recognize. Oh yeah, that's another famous one. So you have all these passages about Muhammad saying that when you meet the Jews or the Christians in the street, do not give them the greeting first. Force them to the narrowest part of the road. You're supposed to bully Christians and Jews. But this is one of the related ones. Abdur Rahman said Ibn Umar passed by a Christian who greeted him. So the Christian greeted him, and Ibn Umar returned the greeting. He was told that the man was a Christian. When he learned that, he went back to him and said, "Give me back my greeting." So it kind of displays the attitude of Muhammad's companions towards Jews and Christians. You're just walking down the street, someone says, "Hey, assalamu alaikum," hey, alaikum assalam, and then you walk away, and then someone say, "Hey, that was a Christian you just greeted." Walk back, "Give me back my greeting, dang it."
That's not how it works. Is Exodus 22:28 referring to child sacrifice? I would argue no. Let me show you a quick channel here. You can use. So Lingus Amo has a video on this. Did God command child sacrifice? You can see it right there. It's 13 minutes long. Also, my brother-in-law, David Wilbur, has a channel on YouTube. It's just how it is. He responded to Dan McClellan on this. And 2 videos, actually. He responded to Dan. Dan responded to him. Then he responded back to Dan. That's all on David Wilbur's channel. So you can check that out as well. So those are 2 good channels that address that. I will hopefully have a video on that sometime next year, perhaps. I need to do some more research on it, though. But yeah, I don't think it is. Robert Alter also has some good stuff on that in his commentary I have behind me there. If crucifixion wasn't a thing in Egypt, then how did Horus get crucified? It's a good point. I didn't think about that.
Airtight.
How did Horus?
Yeah.
Even their prophet Bart Ehrman claimed Jesus dying on the cross is an historical fact. Yeah, you can't get around it. There's no way around this. The Muslim position that Jesus did not die by crucifixion is completely indefensible. Yo, IP, who's the second most obvious fake prophet ever? Hard mode. No Joseph Smith or Russell. Whew. Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, maybe? Is he a prophet? Does he qualify as that? He's Ellen G. White.
He's prophet-ish.
Prophet-ish, yeah. Maybe Ellen G. White claimed to be a prophetess. I think a lot of her stuff is just nonsense. That's the founder of the Seventh-day Adventist movement. Again, I don't think Seventh-day Adventists are necessarily heretics, but I can't take what she says seriously. How do you deal with someone who says they don't care if Christianity is true? They still would not follow a God who says, "Follow me or else." Pray for them. There's nothing more you can do for them. It's the mentality of Satan: better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. The only thing you do is pray for them to be humble and open up, because they're not interested in the evidence at that point. They just won't submit to God anyway. So
yeah, and that's That is exactly how I've always reacted. Because I used to, whether I was having a discussion with a Muslim or an atheist, after, brief discussion, hey, what do you believe about this? What do you believe about that? And getting some information about what the person believes, I eventually get to some question along the lines of, if you're wrong, do you want to know it? Mm-hmm. And a lot of atheists would say no. Not Muslims, but a lot of atheists would just say no. They would add something. I would rather burn in hell if your God was true. Something along those lines. And yeah, I agree with IP. If a person is saying, I do not care and I don't want to know it, that person has some of their own issues to deal with that I don't think you can, that you could refute with any sort of argument or evidence.
How were the children, babies in Numbers 31 killed? So this is, again, I addressed this last time on a stream. I've argued this is not a command from God based on what Robert Alter says about it in his translation commentary. This is Moses acting on his own after God only commanded to make war on the Midianites. And then Moses goes one step further. I don't know how they were, or even if they were, if that was carried out. The text doesn't say. So yeah, this is not something from God or is necessarily going to be considered good, because we don't have this same idea in Islam that you have to protect the prophets from major sin. You can say Moses committed major sins and God still worked through them. So not an issue for us in that regard. Let's see. Atheists will say Easter Ishtar, but consider that Iftar is Ishtar is a much better phonetic match, even better than Momo is SOS. Islam equals pagan, confirmed. I don't know what that is. What is Iftar?
That's their Ramadan meal, that while they're fasting, then they have these huge meals.
Yeah, we can just start using that if they ever try to say that Easter is Ishtar, because that's utter nonsense. How do I defend the Bible if all they do is say it's corrupted, even after I show them verse after verse from the Quran saying, confirming what came before it? Also, how do I show them that Tovia Singer isn't a reliable source? Well, show them the debate with Michael Brown and Tovia Singer. That'd be a good place to start. But for
yeah, that's them.
David's.
So a couple of things there. How can I defend the Bible if all they do is say it's corrupted? So Christians need to keep hammering this point home that the Quran affirms the inspiration, preservation, authority of the Bible. Guys, this happens over and over again. So they'll come out in the 1980s and 1990s with this, it's all the scientific miracles of the Quran. The Quran contains miraculous scientific knowledge that Muhammad couldn't have known. And we respond to it, and they don't listen. We respond to it. They don't listen. We respond to it. Year after year after year after year after year, we respond to it. They don't listen. It looks like you're not making any progress. It looks like no one's listening. And all of a sudden, the argument collapses. Same thing with the perfect preservation. They came up. I mean, you don't understand, even from an Islamic perspective, how absolutely ridiculous and insane it was to claim perfect preservation as evidence for Islam. The early Muslim sources are filled with information about chapters coming up missing, large passages being lost, verses being eaten by a sheep. You have the verses in the Hadith. They're not in the Quran anymore. You say, why aren't those in the Quran anymore? A sheep ate the only copy they had. And you find this over and over again. Then you have centuries of manuscripts with tons and tons of variants. And then you get all the way down to our time, and there are still dozens of different Qurans that are used in different parts of the world. Same gists, I mean, same doctrine and so on, but they do have differences, sometimes even contradictory differences, different Qurans in different parts of the world. What you had was, in 1924, an edition that is called the 1924 Cairo edition was popularized. They said, we're going to make this the main version. They spread it all. They worked on it for 7 years. Then they spread it all. Notice that this is the 100-year anniversary of when the official Quran was released. And suddenly, because that one Quran became popular, you eventually get to the Dawah guys just lying and making something up. Perfect preservation right down to the letter. Not one letter of difference between any two Qurans in all of history. It was a complete lie. Any other guys would have known that it was a lie, but they spread the lie. But guess what? That's the lie they started spreading in the 1990s when this argument became popular. and we respond to it. We sit there and show them over and over and over again what their own sources say about the history of their book. They don't listen. They don't listen. They don't listen. We can put pages of manuscripts right in front of them. This does not line up with that. They don't listen. They don't listen. They don't listen. Hatun brings 26 different Arabic Qurans, not 26 different translations, 26 different Arabic Qurans, 2 speakers corner, to show them the differences. That's when a lot of the Muslims started questioning, going to their dawah guys, what's up with this? What's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
So, but keep in mind, these things take decades. They take decades before you've done. You know what it reminds me of? If you have a block of ice, you set a block of ice. Let's suppose you're in a room and let's suppose it's 10 degrees and you got a block of ice, right? And you slowly turn up the temperature like 1 degree per hour. Well, okay, 11 degrees, still ice. 12 degrees, still ice. 13 degrees, still ice. You keep waiting hour after hour after hour, no change. All of a sudden it gets to 32 degrees and then it starts melting. And then an hour later, it's gone. That's what it looks like. It's just no change, no change. It looks like no change has been made. No change. That change was going along. When it went from 10 to 11 degrees, it was a little closer to turning into water. When it went from 11 to 12 degrees, when it went all the way to 20 degrees, even though it doesn't look like it changed at all, it does not look like it changed, it was changing. The change was a coming. And that's how it is with these arguments. They believe their dawah guys more than they believe you. And so it takes a lot of work before you can sort of overcome that. But it does happen. The argument from perfect preservation, who uses that now? You still have some people online who don't know what's happened. They'll still use it. The dawah guys are not using it anymore. Scientific arguments, the dawah guys are not using it anymore. They've given up on these arguments. They know they're bogus. So change is possible. You just have to make them change. The change is not going to come from within in Islam. It has to come from outside. And that we just have to be relentless.
For me, I don't eat halal meat due to growing up in a Muslim country and being forced to eat it. Now I see it as evil, but I don't think it's a sin to eat. Yeah, I think that's a good approach to take. So, IIRC, the Catholic stance on Mary's sinlessness and perpetual virginity are not necessary, but wholly fitting. Love you, peeps. God bless. Yeah, I think there are arguments for it. I know that Matt Fradd on Pints with Aquinas has had on experts on that, and they have looked more into that. I have not watched those, but I mean, yeah. It's possible there's good arguments for it. That's a topic I've really studied that much.
Interesting. Hey, what's that? Interesting little side note is Mary's also sinless in Islam. Muhammad's not. Oh. Muhammad's not, but Jesus and Mary, sinless in Islam.
Interesting. David Chaos is debating Matt Slick on April 4th on the Gospel Truth channel. Your boy will get smashed, LOL. But any suggestions?
Matt Slick will crush Chaos. What's the topic?
I have no clue what the topic is.
No, I'm asking next Zakir night.
Yeah. IP, can you do more videos against Islam? Don't think anyone is an atheist still besides AP, but Islam is a lot easier to debunk, so more will come to the truth. Yeah, I will do more eventually. What I'm still doing, though, is defending the Bible and defending the biblical worldview. So that is, in a sense, attacking a lot of the Islamic arguments indirectly, because I'm doing a series now on the reliability of the Gospels and arguing for the biblical worldview being true. So answer objections. That's what I'm focusing on now. In the future, I will do more on that. It's just that this is an area I think there's still a need for. So that's what I'm focusing on.
It is funny. No one except AP is still an atheist. That's funny.
Just finished watching Avery and Sam's live. Now watching you guys. Keep fighting the good fight. God bless. Love from New Zealand. Thank you very much. Much appreciated and welcome. What do you think of infant baptism? Some say an infant was baptized. He does not have the Holy Spirit. What verses would you use for defense of it? Yeah, I think it's fine. You could look at the passage of Cornelius and his whole household being baptized. In that world, a household would have been, especially for someone like Cornelius, that had been around 100 people, because it would include the servants, slaves, everyone in that whole household was baptized. It's very unlikely there weren't infants. And proponents of infant baptism will compare it to circumcision. You're being brought into the family of God, just like you were being brought into Israel when you were a young man and circumcised. Likewise, an infant is being baptized into the family of God. So you can compare it to that. And then if you're Catholic, or if you're like Lutheran, for example, First Communion is really like what it would be baptism in like a Pentecostal or Baptist church. So you still have that public proclamation of faith later on, even though the children are baptized. And so not a problem. There is scriptural support for it because it's talking about you and your whole household will be saved, these kinds of things. So yeah, I think infant baptism is perfectly fine. I don't think you need to do it later in life. How do you both keep yourselves in checks under God, especially as your channels grow and your influence grows? Do you have pastors who you go to? Yes. It's very important to be in a church with a pastor. I will talk to my pastor if I need to. If I need to go to confession, he has that kind of system. It's good to be part of a community that's going to keep you grounded and help you grow. Every Friday, I go to a Bible study / evening prayer, which I think is just good to keep myself grounded. I try to participate in as many church events as possible because I think that's very good. And I try to look at others' failures like Steven Crowder and tell myself to never, ever be like that and do everything you possibly can to not end up in like that. So that's kind of stuff to sort of do and keep yourself humble. I'm not going to pay myself exorbitant amount of monies if I ever get to that point. I'm just going to try to keep paying myself what I need to meet basic needs and the like. What about you, David?
Yeah, for the biggest factor for me is just knowing what I was before I became a Christian. So yeah, I think of myself as a total like misfit scumbag who's redeemed by grace. So I can never think of myself as like some massively awesome, important person. It's more like, oh my goodness, God used me for that. What the heck? And then going along, like you were saying, hey, Steven Crowder or something like that. It's you can't think of yourself as too big and too important. Like there, it's just the way you're treating people will eventually come out. But you can have Christians who think that they're just so important that they're never going to be exposed if they're being slimy. Like Ravi Zacharias, right? Thought, hey, I don't know what was going through his mind, but there can be this trend of I'm too important for God to let fail because there's too much riding on me. And nope, God will expose you too. So yeah, there's so sort of. I already think I was kind of born as a dirtbag and then redeemed. So there's nothing special about me. And then even if I really thought, man, I'm so awesome, you can't be so awesome that you think you can get away with disobeying God forever because he'll expose you.
Have you heard of the Didache book? I know it's old news, but I just heard about it. It's worth looking at. Yeah, I talked about the Didache. Michael F. Bird uses that as evidence for early high Christology in the 1st century in his book, Jesus Among the Gods. Yeah, I've known about it for a long time. It's just an early way to conduct worship in the church in the 1st century. Good because right, good because fear God. Why not both? I don't see those as against one another. You can believe both. It's right and it's right to fear God.
They are totally connected. And I'm not even talking about fear God in the sense of, oh no, I'm scared God is going to punish me. That just doesn't enter into my thinking. With me, it's because of God, there is a right. There is a right. It's not just something that some guy in society came up with, and it's not just the way I've been wired because of the way previous organisms were wired to have some sort of herd instinct or something like that. There is an actual right, and there is a wrong, and there is a good, and there is a bad, and God is the foundation for those things. So, yeah, they're connected.
Is total depravity true? That's the topic. But yeah, I hope you'll get a chance to watch Chaos vs. Calvin. Okay, so that's the topic. All right, yeah, I'm interested to see what they're going to say in that. Matt Slick could obviously argue for it. But yeah, cool. Thank you for the heads up.
Chaos is going to get humiliated. Chaos, give you your advice right now. You're going against a man who's been in tons and tons and tons of debates. So you're at a disadvantage. He's been in tons and tons and tons of debates. But that also could be an advantage for you because you have a ton of material to go look at and see how he argues and what his responses are going to be to any things that you're bringing up. So his massive debate experience can be to your advantage in that you now have a record of his arguments and responses.
Hey, Pete, you said in the past you were going to focus on doing videos on Islam. Do you still plan to do those? Yeah, as I mentioned in the earlier super chat, eventually. I need to read more on Islam. It's something I want to get to. It's just hard to fit it in, and some of it's quite boring. So
hey, be sure you glance at my most recent tweet, because that's you'll love that one.
Awesome. Holy Communion seems pagan. Well, your tweets, your super chats seem pagan to me. That is not, as far as I can tell, the consensus even among critical scholars that it's some sort of pagan ritual. That was the idea about 100 years ago. What?
Well, what is Holy Communion even? I mean, what is that?
Good point. What is Holy Communion? But yeah, that was what scholars posited 100 years ago. This came from sort of mystery religion or mystery cult. Not so much today. It's fully consistent with typology you get from the Old Testament. Mike, David of Red Bar Radio is watching the stream live right now as part of his investigation into your channel. Please pray that he finds Christ. Sure, that name sounds familiar. I have to refresh who that is, but if he wants to have a conversation with me, I'd be more than happy to talk about his investigation into Christianity. Not really remembering who Red Bar Radio is, though, so I have to look that up to get more into that. Yeah, I'd be more than happy to talk with him if he's got objections he wants to talk about. We can do something like that in the stream, perhaps even. What do you guys think about Sam Shimon? Is that who we're referring to? What do you think of Sam?
People looking to stir up drama.
Yeah.
I
said on a stream I do a live with him when I was on with Big John Steele, and then people pointed out to me later that he said some pretty bad things about me, so I probably wouldn't do a stream given those things he said about me. So I will revoke what I said on that stream with Big John Steele. But yeah, hopefully we could work some differences out in the future. But right now, yeah, I don't see it. You see, David, you see, It's a C. This stream is brought to you by the letter C. Was there ever an update on Hatun's disappearance? Hope she is doing well.
None that she wants you to know. So
mind your business, folks. Has Marcion come up in Christian Muslim polemics? And I'm trying to think of ways that topic would cross over. I've heard Marcion come up at times, but Marcion would not agree with Islam in a lot of ways. He was more of a Gnostic folk, antinomian, rejected the God of the Old Testament, these kinds of things. So he wouldn't really come up that much, I'd say, that kind of thing. Thank you for the super chat from SJ Thomason. Nice meeting you in Florida. It was great meeting you two in person at ApologetiCon. Have you heard of the miracles, larders? And if so, do you think the apparitions are authentic? I do, by the way. Well, I've not investigated on that much. I do think some appearances of Mary could be authentic. I talked about it in my series on the resurrection, but it's not a necessary thing. And again, my area of focus right now in study just doesn't take me into those topics. So can't say either way.
Yeah, I've never.
Do you ever plan to do more?
Studied.
Oh, yeah. Do you ever
just saying,
more videos on theistic evolution? Yeah, I do. Maybe in the future. I'd like to debate Matt Slick on that. If he ever wanted to do that, maybe we could do that sometime. I would.
You will be crushed by his superior debate experience.
I was on a live stream with him, and I think with Eli Ayaya, Reformed Apologetics, and I think he was a little annoyed that I was a theistic evolutionist. But I'd like to have a conversation with him on it. That might be fun. I'm praying about starting a BS apologetics class at my church. Is that a good idea? Any tips? Yeah, I would say make handouts, make slides to help people learn these topics. That's what I have found to be most helpful when doing those kinds of things. Keep things simple for the average person. You don't need to go too in depth. I learned that the hard way the first time I tried to do that and regret it, trying to give too much information at once. So
hold on, what is a BS apologetics class? What exactly is that? Because that doesn't sound good.
I thought maybe beginners or starters, perhaps something like that.
No, maybe he's just saying, I'm actually a secret undercover atheist, and I'm going to start a BS apologetics class to be a wolf in sheep's clothing at my church. Is this a good idea? No, it's not, if that's what you mean. Scholar with a sword.
I think Jesus' body was left on the cross to rot. Well, go watch my conversation with Captain Dadpool on his channel that we did on TikTok, and he posted to YouTube after. I don't think there's a lot of good evidence for that. All the evidence overwhelmingly supports the Jews took bodies off the crosses and buried them, which even Josephus admits. We have archaeological evidence for that in the burial box of Yohanan. And of course, we have multiple attestation that Jesus was buried in reliable sources. So yeah, I don't think that's a good case. I also have a video on my channel that covers a lot of the evidence for that.
Yeah, but thank you for sending a super chat to IP to share a position that you have absolutely no evidence for.
Hi, what are we to do with Christian misconceptions of Christ's nature through history, i.e. solar Christology in the 3rd and 4th centuries? Misconceptions. Okay, so I mean, read the church fathers, I guess, arguing for the correct view on that they gave really good cases, like Augustine, for example. And solar Christology, I'd have to refresh my brain on what that specifically is referring to, and specifically which church fathers you're referring to. Like recently, looking at Tertullian's misunderstanding of aspects of the Trinity. Now, he was Trinitarian, but he thought that the Word was eternal, and then the Word only took on the title of the Son when he became man. So just look at later church fathers like, Alexander of Alexandria on that sort of address those kinds of issues. I'd say look at the church father responses on that and see what they say. And I'd have to refresh myself on this specific topic to know more.
Yeah, and things are going to come down to you're not automatically right because you're a church father. It's you do have to actually pay attention to what their argument and their evidence is. So do they have a good argument or good evidence for whatever position they're espousing?
FYI, Red Bar is investigating your ministry finances, not Christianity, but I'm praying the Lord softens his heart. Like, okay, fine. All that stuff is the ministry.
Is that what this dude does? Is that what this dude does?
So. I guess so. Like,
gonna get you.
I mean, I don't live in a really nice neighborhood, so to give him some idea of where I'm currently at financially and
some people got a lot of time on their hands.
Yeah, and it's like if you're gonna do that, man, you're not interested in actually like having a fair conversation or hearing someone out. Like you're just trying to find something to attack someone so you can get more clicks and views. Like that's ridiculous.
Yeah, like what if he investigated you and found out you're like an undercover multi-millionaire or something? Like, aha, now you shouldn't listen to his videos.
Yeah. I mean, right now I'm trying to raise funds so I can hire an employee. I can only afford to pay myself. Like, so I pay an editor who basically works as a contractor to help me edit because I don't have time to edit my videos anymore. I used to edit them all. I pay another guy who helps me with social media, pay him as a contractor. The goal would be to bring him on as an employee. And I'm not sure we're there yet with terms of how much we're even bringing in a month. I'm bringing in more than I need to pay myself right now. But we're using the additional funds to try to raise more so I can eventually hire him full time. Because with taxes and everything and healthcare, it's hard to do that. Like the ministry doesn't even pay my full healthcare. We pay like a percentage type thing because it's just, I don't know. Like, come on, like grow up. BS Bible study. Oh. Okay, sorry. Obviously. 5 silver pesos says, thank you for the $100 super chat. Very much appreciated.
You see, this is why Red Bar needs to investigate you.
Oh, no. Yes. YouTube's going to take a huge cut. Would sons begotten make him a byproduct of the father? No, because the way that the book of Acts interprets that, it's when the Psalm 2:7 says, you are my son, today I've begotten you. He interprets it as the day that he sort of comes into his kingdom. That's how the book of Acts tends to interpret that. But no, because the son is eternally begotten of the father. He's not a byproduct, and he's begotten of the same substance. So in Trinitarian thought, the son is still fully God because he's eternally begotten and shares all the same intrinsic properties as Joshua Sijuwati talks about in his work on that. So no, he's not I wouldn't say byproduct. I'd say that's the wrong word. Would son begot? Oh, I just used that one. What's the concept of hell like in the Tanakh? I don't know off the top of my head. Oh, wait. I'm sorry. I'm thinking Talmud. Tanakh, it's like Sheol. So it's the same sort of thing you get in Jesus' parable of the rich man and Lazarus. Everyone goes to Sheol. There's 2 parts for the good and the bad. And the good sort of wait in Abraham's bosom until they're sort of resurrected. That's tends to be the idea. But there's also not as much information on it in the Old Testament. So, it's hard to say. I'm new to Christianity, less than a year. Is it important to learn the scriptures first as a beginner? The whole denomination thing is overwhelming. Yeah, it can be. Take things slow. Know you're saved by grace through faith, not of works. So don't worry too much about the things here and there. Know that you're saved by grace, not for having perfect theology, but study different aspects. Take your time. There's no rush. That's what I'd say. Got to go to bed. You guys have to wrap it up. All right. That's a good point. We will wrap it up there. You heard it. The super chat said it is time to wrap it up. I think that's a good idea. Thanks for coming, everyone. I appreciate all the super chats. We had a ton tonight, probably because the Dizzle's here, and that tends to happen when he shows up. I will probably be doing a Twitter space tomorrow. So if anyone wants to check out Twitter, I think myself, Cat Canada, and AP will be doing something on that. I will talk to you guys all later. Thank you for coming. I'll see you guys next time.